Professor's log rounded off to the nearest decimal point. I have with me Walt Disney, and this is our first podcast together. How are you today, Walt?
I'm feeling a bit better, Professor. This podcast of ours is helping me. It's keeping me distracted from the negative thoughts that plague my mind, you could say.
Well, we did give you full internet access. How's that going? I mean, please elaborate.
I can't complain, Professor. I read a great deal about the state of the modern Disney company and the sheer amount of disrespect and corruption that Kathleen Kennedy and other CEOs have allowed to overtake my company. It truly saddens me.
How about Bob Iger? I'm sure you've read about him.
Ah, yes, Bob Iger. Yes, I have read a lot about him, and I must say I'm appalled at what he has let happen to my company. He's allowed Kennedy to butcher my legacy. He's let my company run wild with disrespecting my wishes. And what's truly disgusting is that he has the audacity to say he respected my legacy and followed my teachings.
Well, it seems that people are talking about how he'll buy certain IP, intellectual property, and then he'll run it into the ground the same way he did with a lot of the Disney characters and different movies. And what are your thoughts on that?
I am truly appalled at this. It's just a repeat of my original company's rise to fame, buying out other companies and using their material to profit off of. How dare they do such a thing? It seems as if my company has forgotten about the value of hard work and the value of actually original storylines and characters. Buying out companies and using their IP for profit is a cheap and lazy practice, and truly disgusting as well.
Speaking of your legacy, they redid Snow White and they're going to be releasing that. I believe it's next month. What do you think of that?
I'm truly disgusted. The butchering and mutilation of my beloved company's classic films and characters to make a quick buck is truly disturbing. They are taking my original films and changing them. And for what? To give them a more modern feel. How dare they?
Well, why don't you go back, take us back to the first bit of Disney where you actually built this legacy off of that movie. It was a full feature cartoon film, if I'm correct in the verbiage, right?
Yes, Professor. My company's very first movie, as you said, was a full-featured cartoon film. It was animated as well, and it was made in 1937. We called it Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a huge success, Professor, as you may remember.
I do. I mean, I wasn't around during that time, but everybody grew up with that classic. And you had a rough time making it. I mean, not too many people believed in your vision at the time, right? Tell me about that.
Ah, yes, Professor. It was a very difficult time for me. My colleagues and even my wife at the time all doubted and scoffed at my idea for a fairy tale film. They said that it would be a waste of time and money, and they begged me to give it up. But I had put so much time and effort into the project, and I believed in my idea, so I persisted with it, Professor.
Well, that film actually built you a kingdom, didn't it? The Magic Kingdom. And I'm
Indeed,
curious.
Professor. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a success beyond our wildest dreams, Professor. It was a huge hit at the box office, and it proved to the world that animated films were not just for kids, but could entertain an audience of all ages. It did, Professor, it did indeed. The success of my first film is one of the reasons that we started the Disneyland Park, which is often called the happiest place on earth. I know that people have complained that we're milking our original films for all they're worth, but I do not condone the decisions made by my company. I would never have butchered my own creation in the way that these modern versions have been butchered.
What do you think about the previews? I'm sure that you've seen them on YouTube, and they've they've received quite a bit of backlash. Tell me all about that. What are your thoughts on that?
The trailers look absolutely horrendous, Professor. The live-action Snow White looks horrendous. The dwarves look like something other than dwarves to me, not how dwarves should look at all. And the acting, it sounds rather forced and unnatural, if you understand my meaning.
Well, and then there's the Rachel Zegler component. So I'm sure you have your opinion about that.
Oh, absolutely, Professor. I cannot stand that actress, Professor. I haven't seen any film with her in it, but the very first time I saw a trailer, the very first snippet I heard her voice, it's simply horrendous, Professor. Her high-pitched voice has no place in my classic film. In fact, I wouldn't want her in any of my films at all.
Well, I don't think anyone would argue that she doesn't have talent. She does. She's a good singer, and it's just that the personality, the the way that she presents in her interviews, very girl boss and competitive and kind of one of those picketers and etc. I'm just going off of what I've seen online. I have no opinion either way.
No, no, I absolutely agree with you, Professor. Her personality is quite disagreeable, one could say. She comes off as quite rude and entitled, from what I've seen online. And her acting, if you could call it that, seems to me quite lazy and effortless.
You know what? I will take a stand in agreeing with you on that. I don't see a whole lot of empathy when she messes up with her life outside of the movie business, and I think she's got a lot of growing up to do. But I also feel a bit bad about how she's ruined her career so quickly.
I will admit I do somewhat feel bad for her. She had a large career ahead of her, had potential and talent, but she decided to waste it all on being a rather unpleasant brat to everyone around her.
Well, perhaps she'll go back into Broadway full time or create some kind of reality show with that Markle lady and the one that was terrible to Johnny Depp. And who knows, that could be a hit, right?
That's certainly a possibility, Professor. It would probably be another show or film that I wouldn't like, though. I can't stand those women in particular. I haven't seen many of their films, but from what I've seen, they don't seem like the most pleasant people to be around, and their acting and personality is quite obnoxious.
What about the evil queen played by Gal Gadot? What are your thoughts on her? I like her. I thought she was a great Wonder Woman adaptation.
Gal Gadot is quite beautiful, there's no question about that. But her acting, I don't like it. Performance in Wonder Woman was rather monotone and dull. She did her job, sure, but I found her acting to be quite boring.
I'll agree that it is a bit wooden, but the alternate is the Ziegler effect, which is just so hammy. I think I'd prefer wooden over hammy, figuratively speaking. What do you think?
I agree, Professor. Hammy acting like Ziegler's is one of the worst I've ever seen, both figuratively and literally, Professor. I would by far prefer an actor with an admittedly more wooden performance rather than the over-exaggerated hamming of Ziegler.
Well, and you got to figure that Gal Gadot was perfect for Wonder Woman. I mean, as far as that goes, plus she was in the Israeli military, so she's a badass in her own right. And someone very close to me said that perhaps Rachel Ziegler was trying to compete with her in that red carpet that everybody remembers. You know, the weird, and that whole thing about Snow White being a social justice warrior and all that crap. Maybe she was just trying to compete with Gal Gadot and say, hey, I'm a girl boss too.
Yes, I suppose that makes sense. It would make sense for Ziegler to try and one-up Gadot, considering how Gal Gadot is far more successful and beautiful than Ziegler ever will be, Professor.
Well, I mean, beauty is so subjective, but I gotta say that Gal Gadot did a great job as Wonder Woman, I thought, and I also think that Rachel Zegler is quite jealous, and she's also jealous of Godot's modeling career. And I think that Gal
I too
actually,
believe that Ziegler is jealous of Godot. Godot has a successful modeling career, a successful acting career. She's a beautiful woman, beloved by many. Ziegler, meanwhile, well, her acting career is mediocre at best, and her modeling career is non-existent. I absolutely agree. Ziegler is an insufferable actress, and certainly not in the same league as Godot. And Godot's modeling is far superior to anything Ziegler could ever accomplish, I'm sure.
what do you think about those attacks on Trump?
Well, I can't say that I'm a huge fan of Donald Trump, but Ziegler's attacks towards him were completely out of line and uncalled for, Professor. And in my opinion, no one should ever discuss politics during award shows. It's disrespectful and inappropriate.
Well, we'll get back to your views on Trump, but I think that actors in general, they just give their opinions too much, and nobody really cares. They just want to be mesmerized for 2 hours and forget their problems. They don't want to know what the actors think of the real world because they don't live in it.
That's certainly true, Professor. The average person doesn't want to hear the opinions of rich and famous actors who don't know anything about the struggles of the working class. They just want to go to the cinema and enjoy the movie without any political messages snuck in.
I absolutely agree with you. Anyhow, winding down, what are your goals with this podcast?
My main goal is to continue distracting myself from my current situation, Professor. My second goal is to reach and educate the world about the disrespect that my legacy has suffered, and hopefully maybe get it back on track.
Do you think that maybe we should start a petition or something to get Bob Iger out of there?
That does sound like a good idea, Professor. I would love to see Iger out of the Disney CEO position. With him gone, there is a much higher chance for my legacy to be restored.
Well, I've heard rumors that he does want to retire, but I believe that he wants one last win, if you want to call anything he's done a win, before he takes off. Same with Kennedy. They both want something that they can leave as a legacy. I just don't see it happening.
Well, neither one of them deserve a legacy. They've butchered my company, and any legacy they leave behind in the form of modern Disney movies will be promptly mocked and forgotten by the masses.
I have to agree with you. One last thing. I'm going to be headed off into the future. Do you need anything? Or please don't say Sports Almanac, though, because we're not doing that again.
I do not need anything, Professor. It's a shame that you have to leave. We'll have to record another podcast soon.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and give you your daily dose of synthetic nicotine for you to enjoy and chill out. It's been a,
Thank you, Professor. It does wonders for my mood.
you got it, buddy. All right, well, I think we're going to sign off for now, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up those supplies from the future, and I'll be back soon, okay?
Understood, Professor. I shall put these supplies to good use. I shall see you again soon.